points in Kings history. In his 8th season in the league, he's averaging just over 25 points a game. The Dodgers have agreed to a $13 million contract with reliever Kirby Yates. It's a one-year deal with one of the best relievers in baseball last season. He posted a 1.17 ERA over 61 and 2/3 innings. He had 85 strikeouts and 33 saves for the Texas Rangers. Commanders offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury will stay put with the Commanders. He was in the running to take over the head coaching job for the Saints. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Progressive's Auto Quote Explorer lets you easily compare direct rates from different insurance companies, so you can be confident you're getting the right one, even if it's not with Progressive. Way more confident than you were when you bought that TV in a parking lot. It just happened to not come in a box or include a remote. And when you finally managed to turn it on, all it displayed was the menu of Grumpy's Tacos. So use Progressive's Auto Quote Explorer and be confident you're getting insurance that's right for you. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Accomplishing goals is hard, but when your goal is to learn a new language, Babbel makes it easy. Babbel is designed with you in mind. From expert-created lessons to conversational video units and even live classes, you can personalize your Babbel experience to be exactly what you need to really learn a new language more easily. Go ahead, set a goal for yourself. Accomplish it with Babbel. Try Babbel for free. Go to BABBEL.com. That's Babbel.com.
No way football is playing in the fall and winter
because the hits don't hurt as much when you're numb. Get the lowdown on all the sports action coming up right here.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
We welcome you to Football Full Circle. It is FFC live right here on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. He is Scott Wetzel. I am Ben Stevens. A Wednesday live on FFC as the countdown to Super Bowl 59 continues to track on. 11 days away from the biggest game of any NFL season each and every year. Super Bowl Sunday, February 9th in New Orleans. We'll look at the game. We'll continue to break down the odds, but we're kind of in that lull right now where the odds really have not moved since the opening numbers to where they are at the moment, and more than likely won't move all that much in the next few days until we get into the thick of Super Bowl week out in the Big Easy. But Scott, that does not mean the NFL slows down, because for 30 other NFL organizations, the future is now, the offseason is here, and that coaching carousel continues to spin, not just with who could become the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints, our only lasting vacancy in the NFL, but who has taken themselves out of consideration as well.
Yeah, and again, I'll repeat myself that I've been saying over the last few days here. I just don't believe, although the Cohen situation did turn out to be true down in with Jacksonville, but I just don't believe all these people that are pulling themselves out, Mike McCarthy, one being one of the latest, that, if the New Orleans Saints came to Mike McCarthy, right, he's an accomplished, head coach. You're telling me, really, if the Saints came to you and said, you're our guy, you're going to say, nah, I need a year off? I just don't believe it, Ben. I think they've chosen their guy. They obviously can't make that announcement. And these guys are all just trying to save face a little bit. It's amazing how the egos, right? God forbid. I mean, how many times have you applied for a job, right? Myself as well. Every radio and TV guy, right? Thousands that we didn't get. If we took that kind of approach and just said, all right, I'm pulling myself out of the four-letter network job that I was applying for. I mean, we'd be sending out, releases every day, for goodness sakes. So it's amazing how these coaches have to protect their egos.
Yes, it certainly is, Scott, and they can do so right now because there is still that head coaching vacancy in the Big Easy. There has been some reports, of course, about who the Saints are targeting, a guy still working for one of the two teams in the chase for a Super Bowl championship. That would be the Eagles offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore. But the two big names yesterday that, at least as reports have stated, are out of the running to become New Orleans' next head coach, that would be Mike McCarthy and Washington's OC in Cliff Kingsbury. Scott, let's start with Mike McCarthy, though, in an examination on where he stands in the NFL head coaching cycle, at least based on the report that he and his representation, of course, gave to NFL insiders. They are no longer interested in the Saints' job and are focused now on the 2026 NFL head coaching cycle. McCarthy isn't going to become an offensive assistant or anything somewhere at this point. He is going to take a year off from the NFL for the upcoming campaign of 2025 and try to put his hat back into the ring in 2026. To me, Scott, as you alluded to, if you actually were a hot commodity and you were a finalist or in consideration in interviewing for head coaching vacancies at this moment and you didn't get a job, why are you so confident that will be the case next year? I will say, from McCarthy's perspective, it did work once when he was fired in Green Bay in 2018 at the end of 13 weeks, took off 2019 in full, claimed that he was learning the analytical side of the new wave of offensive football at Pro Football Focus, basically admitted that he lied to Jerry Jones to get the Cowboys head coaching job and was in Dallas to start 2020 for the next 5 years. What we know right now, Mike McCarthy out of the running, out of the 2025 cycle, going to focus on 2026 and beyond in the NFL.
Yeah. How'd that taking that year off work for Bill Belichick? Right? I mean, he took the year off, probably not in his own design, but, in the running for the Falcon job, doesn't get it, takes the year off, and then, I'm assuming didn't have any offers from the NFL this year, and now is sitting at North Carolina. So, the other thing, Ben, is, when guys take years off, what do they do now? This is 2020 plus, right? They go to TV to kind of impress people and show themselves on TV, almost like an everyday, marketing job for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And, I don't know Mike McCarthy at all, but from what we've seen on TV and what we've seen in his post-game and pre-game press conferences, he comes across as like dopey, right? I mean, I'm sure he's a genius. Listen, he got a Super Bowl ring, right? So he's a smart guy. Don't get me wrong. But he doesn't come across as a guy that if you didn't know who he was, you'd like, wow, this guy's impressive. I got to hire that guy. He comes, you look at him on the sidelines, he's got that dopey looking face in the press conferences. What went wrong, coach? I don't know. We got to go back to work. He doesn't come across like I said, like, wow, I got to hire that guy. So sometimes that could work, against you by taking the year off.
Yeah, and it did not the last time, right? It was a disastrous end to his tenure in Green Bay, despite pretty consistent success and a Super Bowl championship in 2010. Of course, there was the disagreement with Aaron Rodgers. There were reports that Mike McCarthy was not taking his job seriously enough. And just from the coaching perspective, never elevated Green Bay back to that level of a Super Bowl appearance or a Lombardi trophy in the years after the 2010 NFL season. But still a successful head coach, has won more than 60% of his games throughout his coaching tenure. A long time in Green Bay. These past 5 seasons at the Star. I did love Mike McCarthy admitting flat out in his introductory press conference now 5 years ago with the Cowboys that he lied to Jerry Jones about watching tape, about grinding film, and studying the new wave of analytics for the modern approach to the National Football League. We'll see if there is going to be a job that considers Mike McCarthy in 2026. Scott, one thing you always know, there are going to be vacancies. Are there going to be 7 like there was this offseason or 8 of a year ago? You never know. It could be 4 to 5, but there will be some opportunity there, it would seem, in 2026 and beyond for Mike McCarthy. But the old saying is strike while the iron is hot. And at the end, really, that week that the season was over for the Cowboys and maybe negotiating a new contract before his current one had expired in Dallas, he became all of a sudden a hot commodity. The Bears reached out for permission to speak with him before his contract and exclusive negotiating window had closed. There was some conversation that maybe Mike McCarthy was the best thing to develop the young Caleb Williams, that he was going to in-person interview in New Orleans. Could other teams be interested? So for Scott, in the last 10 days or so, for McCarthy to go from that, seeming like he was going to be a front runner for at least one, if not multiple NFL head coaching gigs, to now have to say, I'm going to take the year off and talk to you guys next January. I don't know if that's exactly the best indictment on Mike McCarthy getting a 3rd head coaching job in the NFL.
Yeah, he really does think highly of himself. I read a quote where he was talking with someone, I'm not exactly sure who, but he was saying, yeah, you know what, I took a team, I built a championship, I know how to win, I got a ring and this and that, right? All speaking about what happened at Green Bay, obviously. But, realistically, if you think about his career, he didn't get the job done in Dallas. He took over a championship caliber team and took it no further than what it was before he got there. And there's a lot of people that make the case that they should have won more. I'm me being one of them in Green Bay. When you had Aaron Rodgers in his prime, Devontae Adams, they had good teams up there, and he only found a way to win one. So, but he, listen, he's a Super Bowl, champion, so he can think highly of himself, but just be careful. Yes, we did have Pete Carroll get a job this year, but the new wave is hiring the young offensive coordinator, or young defensive coordinator. It's not hiring guys in their 50s approaching 60. It's hiring guys in their late 30s approaching 40. So,
yeah, and Scott, to your point about really not elevating the ceiling for a long time at Lambeau, 6 consecutive years after winning that Super Bowl, the Packers made the postseason. Only got to the conference championship game twice, and they won the division 5 of those 6 years, hosting at least a playoff game in the frozen tundra, unable to break through even with another Super Bowl appearance. More around the coaching carousel up next.
4 out of 5 scientists agree it's smarter to be on SportsGrid, and we're pretty sure that one scientist is still a virgin.
He just gives that 5.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The White House expects up to 10% of federal employees to quit in a buyout program meant to end work-from-home practices, according to senior administration officials. With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg. A government-wide email President Trump's aides plan to send Tuesday will say employees have until February 6th to decide whether to participate in a deferred resignation program, which would give federal employees the ability to decide now that they will resign in September. The American Federation of Government Employees, the largest federal employee union, is criticizing the program. Bags of Lay's classic potato chips have received an elevated recall status due to an undeclared ingredient that could cause a, quote, life-threatening allergic reaction. The FDA raised the snack food recall to Class 1. The recalled product was distributed to certain retail stores and distributors in Oregon and Washington, and it was available for purchase as early as November 3rd, 2024. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Now's the time to shop limited-time doorbuster deals during Pro Savings Days at Lowe's. Save $50 on a Little Giant King Combo 6-foot ladder. Was $199, now $149. Plus, save $100 on a DeWalt XR 20-volt Power Stack 5-amp-hour battery. Was $199, now $99. Get these can't-miss deals now before they're gone. Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows pros. Doorbusters valid 1/13 through 1/15. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
Progressive presents Renter's MVP's Most Valuable Possessions. Today's MVP, Tom Kelly's carbon fiber mountain bike. Because more than riding his carbon fiber mountain bike, Tom loves telling people about his carbon fiber mountain bike. Friends, family, even a local barista knows about his carbon fiber mountain bike. And that's why Tom's carbon fiber mountain bike, if you haven't heard about it, is today's MVP. Keep your most valuable possessions protected by bundling your renters and auto insurance with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
There's something you should know and always remember.
SportsGrid does not increase luck.
We're your unfair advantage for the latest sports gaming information. If you're looking for luck,
go find a horseshoe.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
More NFL coaching news around the National Football League live right here on Football Full Circle. Scott, as we shared, 2 guys taking their names out of consideration with as much stake as you want to put into those words yesterday for the Saints head coaching job. Mike McCarthy out of the 2025 cycle, going to focus on the 2026 head coaching search and any potential opportunities that arise. Cliff Kingsbury, after his first year as the offensive coordinator with the Commanders, and a highly successful one offensively at that, in partnership with the rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, had garnered some interest around the NFL, and multiple organizations had stated his intention to become an NFL head coach once again after a few years in Arizona. is taking himself out of the running and returning to Washington. He will be back for a second year as the OC with the Commanders, working, of course, in congruency with Jaden Daniels under Dan Quinn. We can put as much stock as we want into the idea that Kingsbury was a finalist for that Saints head coaching job, but really, Scott, from the Commanders' perspective, really only optimism to build on this offseason. The building blocks are in place, especially on the offensive side of the football, to continue to see that success in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, this one kind of makes sense, even though I don't necessarily believe it, but it's kind of like Ben Johnson last year, right? I mean, it's hard. You'd be hard-pressed to not like the future of the Washington offense with Jaden Daniels. Now, anything could happen. Guy could get hurt or whatever, but I wouldn't think they would blame Kingsbury for that. So they go get themselves a big-time wide receiver to go alongside McLaurin, maybe a T. Martin, draft a guy, and, there's nothing but, good things on the horizon for Washington. Now, again, they'll go from a last-place schedule to a second-place schedule, a little more difficult, certainly, and you're going to get some better teams. And, San Francisco, I'm thinking, is going to be back, and L.A., as long as Matthew Stafford returns, going to be good again. There's a lot of good teams in the NFC, so they might not have as much success on the field, but I would think offensively, his stock, meaning Kingsbury, is not going to drop if he stays another year in Washington.
Yeah, I would agree with you as well, Scott. And I think when you look at Cliff Kingsbury, some success in Arizona, not nearly as much as they were hoping for, should have been a divisional championship and plenty more in that 2021 season, I believe, when the Rams went on their run to win a Super Bowl championship, dispatching of the Cardinals in that opening round of the postseason. And we could argue Cliff Kingsbury and his success as the head coach, his offensive acumen, his ability to design schemes that put his offense in good spots, I think really is not up for debate. The success that he and Jaden Daniels saw in 2024, to have that consistency back year over year, entering the second and sophomore season for Daniels, that's a great sign for anybody that believes in Washington. And I am fascinated, Scott. The Commanders' win total entering this year was 6.5. Rookie quarterback, first-year head coach in Washington, that being Dan Quinn with a completely new staff, and, of course, Cliff Kingsbury in his first year there as the OC. They nearly doubled that up. They won 2 playoff games on the road as an underdog and led the franchise to the first conference championship game appearance in more than 3 decades since 1991's NFL season. But as you have said, Scott, you go from the hunter to the huntee. You're not going to be the divisional favorite in the NFC East. Going to be the team playing in the Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles. But the odds from a win total perspective for Washington entering 2025, can't wait to see what that number is. You would guess at least 9.5 with some juice on the over. If not, maybe Scott into double digits, 10.5, and maybe even juice on both sides.
Yeah, I would think 9.5. I think that 9.5, I'm trying to remember which. I think the AFC next year has the extra home game. So they would have NFC, one more road game. So I would think it would be 9.5. Yeah, it's funny about Kingsbury. The biggest knock on him, he still has that stigma, that dark cloud that's carrying him, in that he couldn't win with Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. And if Patrick Mahomes wins another Super Bowl, I'm sure that's going to be brought up, kind of joking. It's not like they didn't score 40, 50 points a game at Texas Tech. They just couldn't stop anybody. But that is the kind of funny thing. And I actually think, he probably needs like one more year. Just separate himself, let Arizona be Arizona again, finish with 6 or 7 wins, and not be great with Kyler Murray, and then have people realize that, maybe it really wasn't Kingsbury. Maybe it really is Kyler Murray. Maybe no matter who's at Arizona, you weren't going to win that situation. So this really, to me, is an actual good year off, if you will, even though it's obviously not a year off. But as far as Washington, more difficult schedule. You're going to go from the hunter to huntee. But I like Jane Daniels so much, and I think they're going to make moves. They got a brand new owner. He wants to win. They've tasted success. Good head coach. They keep the coordinators. I would be more surprised if they didn't, get to the 10, 11 win total. I don't know about 12. Yeah. 12 5 this year was really good. But I do think they end up being a playoff team. And, at least continue the consistency of having a winning record versus falling way back.
Yeah, I would agree, Scott. And one of the knocks against the Commanders, outside of that Week 16 win over Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts exited the game 5 minutes into it, of course, in concussion protocol. They didn't have a single win all year long against a team above 500 outside of the Eagles. I think they kind of disproved any idea they were not worthy of a playoff spot or beating the best of the best on that magical postseason run. But that will be a difference for the Commanders also in 2025. Favored against those teams that are expected to be good as well. And can you match that expectation? I am not predicting or projecting a sophomore slump by any means for Jaden Daniels, but we did see that with C.J. Stroud, who was also a world beater and had his name engraved on the Offensive Rookie of the Year award by Week 10, Week 11. There is going to be a lot of focus and attention on Jaden Daniels, not just the record-setting rookie quarterback, but can you back it up to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC in only your second year in the league?
Yeah, and think about this, Ben. They had 5 straight wins heading into the Detroit Lion playoff game where they won on the final play of the game. You know, that's hard to have that kind of success, fortune, whatever you want to call it, 2 years in a row.
It is. It certainly is. There is that regression to the mean when you have some luck or some good vibes going your way. Just a little bit more in the coaching carousel, some of the offseason news around the NFL, and then we'll talk a little Super Bowl 59. That's next on Football Full Circle.
There's smart.
And there's not smart.
Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Keep it here.
And win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
1936, the first players are elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Matheson, and Walter Johnson are all elected. Cobb received 98.2% of the votes, while the Bambino received 95.1%. Shockingly, the Iron Horse, Lou Gehrig, received 22.5%, while Cy Young, 49%. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
The uncanny valley, that feeling of unease you get from humanoid androids whose looks creep you out on a subconscious level.
I am wearing my smiling face. Does that displease you?
New tech from Osaka University dynamically synthesizes android facial movements to express their mood.
Yes, I'm tickled pink.
Breaking down moods into overlapping waves that blend naturally.
I'm running on fumes.
Mixing in realistic breathing, eye blinks, and even spontaneous yawning. Real emotions enhance the communications with robots in a more natural, human-like manner.
In other words, just another uncanny valley Sunday in synthetic human land.
Follow me at Chicapalbo on X and stay tuned to The Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Pharrell, Coast to Coast.
I'm telling you, beating Iowa State is going to be a problem for everyone in the NCAA tournament. They are not afraid to show up anywhere and play anyone, anytime. Your gym, our gym, they don't care. That is a legitimate Final Four team. They mean business.
It's Pharrell, Coast to Coast with Scott Farrell. Weekdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. On the home of the winning edge, the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go,
there you are.
Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you.
So now you can get the winning edge
anywhere, even while the wife's talking to you.
if you've got an earbud.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. Scott, some more news around the NFL in terms of the coaching ranks, featuring a former NFL head coach who spent 6 years in Indianapolis. That would be Chuck Pagano, out of retirement and back to coaching in the NFL. He will be the senior secondary coach under John Harbaugh with the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, Pagano, one of the great defensive minds we have seen in the NFL in the last 10 to 15 years, had some great success in Indy, and then was let go at the end of his 6th season with only 4 wins that year for the Colts. He is now back in the National Football League, hoping to at least provide some coaching experience in the Charm City.
Yeah, that's good. I think he's got some ties to Harbaugh and the Baltimore team as well. So, I mean, that's, I always liked him. I always thought that he got a raw deal with Indianapolis. They were dealing with so many issues at that time. So, seemed like a nice guy. Little surprised he didn't get another opportunity after that, but things, health-wise and everything else came into play. So, yeah, that's good for Baltimore to have him come on board.
Yeah, absolutely so, right? When you can add one of those guys that is just a lifer and so highly regarded both as a person and as a defensive expert, that's great news for Chuck Pagano and now the Baltimore Ravens, hoping to make that defense even better year over year. End of the year, great. Start of the year, a little bit uneasy with Zach Orr, their new defensive coordinator, who's only 31, soon to be 32. So to have that perspective from Chuck Pagano is a really good sign. Scott, we were talking about the New Orleans Saints job. We talked about it yesterday. If guys like Cliff Kingsbury and Mike McCarthy are telling us, hey, I'm out of the running, do we take them at their word that they pulled out because the Saints job is not all that attractive? Or do we think New Orleans has zeroed in on its potential next head coach? I probably lean more with the latter, Scott. And if they are zeroing in on somebody who is not currently being introduced as the head coach, that means the person is still working. Could he be with the Chiefs? Could it be Steve Spagnuolo? That would be a surprise, Scott, especially with all the reports. It's Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator for Philadelphia. With this news this week, the fact the Saints have not brought anybody in as of yet, you do have to believe that if something does not happen in New Orleans in terms of a hiring of a head coach by the end of week, by the end of Friday, that means they just have to wait the additional week for the Super Bowl to play out before Kellen Moore can be formally introduced. Mike Kafka has been there interviewing as well. There are still a few names, but Scott, all signs at this moment point to Kellen Moore becoming a first-time head coach in the Big Easy.
Yeah, you would think that would be it, right? You do wonder, at least I knew, Ben, about Steve Spagnuolo. I know he had an interim job with the Giants. Don't count that. Things didn't work out with the St. Louis Rams. But, for the most part, him in Kansas City defense has been credited, last year and this year for carrying the Chiefs, relatively young guy. I mean, he's not like he's in his 70s, a la Pete Carroll. Comes across well, but you don't hear his name at all. I mean, it is amazing. There were more people talking about Eric Bieniemy a couple of years ago than they were when they have Steve Spagnuolo. It just seems like he's an afterthought, just a complete, you know what, you had your chance, that's it. No matter how much success you've had since then, nope, we don't view you. It's amazing how the media, they latch on to guys, whether it's Ben Johnson, whether it seems to be Kellen Moore, it's the flavor of the month. And, man, they just push that guy's agenda. And if you don't have a guy or a media member or the media in general pushing your agenda, sometimes it's tough to kind of come out of the blue.
Scott, he has won 4 Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator. 2007 with the Giants, 2019 with Kansas City, and, of course, these previous 2 as well. You look at Patrick Mahomes, his tenure in Kansas City, taking over as the starter in 2018. The fact the Chiefs have played in 7 consecutive AFC championship games, about to make their 5th Super Bowl appearance in that span, 3 Lombardi trophies. We know the story. Steve Spagnuolo became the defensive coordinator for Kansas City in 2019, a pretty similar timeline there as well. Yeah. And the story early in this dynastic run, Scott, was Patrick Mahomes being all-time and otherworldly. Still, obviously, one of the great quarterbacks we have seen, at least in recent memory, but it was the offense and the genius that was Andy Reid and guys like Matt Nagy and Eric Bieniemy that were carrying this team. The story of the last 2 years, Steve Spagnuolo and that defense. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk a little bit more about the Saints and just how attractive of a destination it can be for whoever becomes the next head coach on the other side of the break. And then we'll further talk Steve Spagnuolo and what we can expect out of that Chiefs defense in a tough matchup against the Eagles in Super Bowl 59. All of that next on Football Full Circle.
The winning edge.
You've got it.
But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us.
But we're working on that.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Commanders offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury will stay put with the Commanders. He was in the running to take over the head coaching job for the Saints. The Dodgers have agreed to a $13 million contract with reliever Kirby Yates. It's a one-year deal with one of the best relievers in baseball last season. He posted a 1.17 ERA over 61 and two-third innings. He had 85 strikeouts and 33 saves for the Texas Rangers. The Sacramento Kings are reportedly interested in potentially trading De'Aaron Fox. The 27-year-old's got a year left on his contract before he hits free agency. It's believed that San Antonio is atop his list of preferred landing spots. The NBA trade deadline is February the 6th. Fox has played his entire career for Sacramento. He ranks 4th in career points in Kings history. In his 8th season in the league, he's averaging just over 25 points a game. Bundle auto and home, renters or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Now's the time to shop limited-time doorbuster deals during Pro Savings Days at Lowe's. Save $50 on a Little Giant King Combo 6-foot ladder. Was $199, now $149. Plus, save $100 on a DeWalt XR 20-volt Power Stack 5-amp-hour battery. Was $199, now $99. Get these can't-miss deals now before they're gone. Lowe's knows savings. Lowe's knows pros. Doorbusters valid 1/13 through 1/15. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
That spice is 10 out of 10. Would recommend. Hi, my name is Khadijah, and a little thing I love about the Chick-fil-A Grilled Spicy Deluxe Sandwich is that spicy kick of the chicken. It's just the right amount of heat, and it gets me excited. And then, pro tip, add that cilantro lime sauce. It cools it down. If the sandwich is at 100, the cilantro lime takes it to 200. It makes me want to, tell all my friends and family.
Order a Chick-fil-A Grilled Spicy Deluxe Sandwich and a Diet Dr. Pepper on the Chick-fil-A app for a limited time. Real guests paid for their testimonial.
You're listening to SportsGrid.
Spreading the winning edge far and wide.
Terrestrial, internet, TV, satellite, and don't forget our mobile app.
Face it.
The winning edge is everywhere.
Somewhere there's a squirrel frustrated he can't get a phone.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Just to tidy up the conversation around Steve Spagnuolo, one of the most successful defensive coordinators maybe in NFL history. 3 Lombardi trophies with the Chiefs, a Super Bowl championship as the DC with the New York Giants as well. Was not successful really as a full-time head coach in 3 years in St. Louis. 3 seasons, all a losing record, Scott. Only a total of 10 wins in those 3 years with the Rams, 2009 through 2011. But it is interesting that in all the names that get brought up in head coaching interviews and seeing how many guys the Bears interviewed, and basically if you had ever once worked in the NFL, the Jets wanted to interview you as well. Steve Spagnuolo's name was not often thrown around as one of the hottest commodities. He's not exactly a spring chicken, but to your point, he certainly is not one of the oldest head coaches that you would see, 65 years old as of this moment. And Chris Jones, the outstanding defensive tackle for Kansas City, basically said as such after the AFC Championship game. You guys get mad at the Chiefs for all these calls and all this stuff. As long as everybody in the NFL keeps focusing on the next up-and-coming head coach and they keep allowing Steve Spagnuolo to come back as our defensive coordinator, we're going to continue to be in these spots. And maybe in 2019, Scott, you laugh and say, you guys have an offense that can score 35 points at will, led by one of the most dynamic players at the quarterback position in Patrick Mahomes. Now, especially the last 2 years, it's really been the defense that has carried the weight for Kansas City.
Yeah, it's really weird. Let's play devil's advocate and give some reasons why, maybe, right? Okay, first off, Kansas City's in the Super Bowl basically every single year, although that's not going to stop Kellen Moore, but it does present a little bit of a problem. 2, he's the defensive guy. Look at all these guys that are getting hired, Ben. It's all offense. Young offensive coordinators. It's not the defensive guys. You've had the Brian Flores throws their names out there, but for the most part, these teams know you win on offense, so we want the offensive guy. 2, where's Andy Reid in this thing? I said the same thing a few years ago when they were talking about Eric Bieniemy. Andy Reid, one of the most respected head coaches in the NFL, right? Is it, they've had some guys go, the Nagys of the world that haven't had success, so they want to shy away, but that's offense, not defense. But, where's Andy Reid go to some of these teams some of these owners, right? He knows Lamar Hunt, right? Yeah, this guy is great. You know what? He's been with us for 5-6 years. He's helped us win how many Super Bowls? If you're looking for a guy, here's your guy. So I kind of blame Andy Reid a little bit as part of, why can't he get him some interviews and get him an opportunity? So that's what I've kind of come up with, because otherwise it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Maybe he doesn't want to be a head coach. Maybe he said he's been there, done that. I got a great situation in Kansas City. They let me run the defense. We got a good team. Maybe that's part of it.
Scott, there is something to that, right? Great coordinators, scheming up a game plan, calling plays into your team where you can be 100% laser focused on only one side of the football, on only one group, not having to manage practice, what time guys show up to the facility, when are we meeting, when are we doing this, here's how the practice schedule looks like. All that comes in with being the great facilitator that a head coach must be, and a guy that passes off work and all of that. There is probably a beauty into just being, hey, I'm a football guy. I love the X's and O's. I love coaching defense. I want to do that. I'm having great success. We're having a great time. Why would I want to leave? I've had the head coaching job before. It wasn't a ton of fun. It wasn't a very successful run in St. Louis. There could be that in consideration as well, that some guys are happier at the pinnacle of their profession, but not necessarily needing to get to a head coaching gig. It's great results for Kansas City year after year. It is interesting that Andy Reid's coaching tree is not necessarily as expansive as we once believed. Doug Peterson worked under him in KC, became the head coach, of course, of the Eagles, did win a Super Bowl. Matt Nagy did some good things early on in Chicago. Of course, that did not work out all that well, but Eric Bieniemy now looking for jobs. We haven't really seen anybody else. Nagy was actually in consideration as the offensive coordinator once again for maybe some other jobs. But Andy Reid, of course, with many webs everywhere around the National Football League. But for the Chiefs, Scott, having Steve Spagnuolo year after year is why they're playing in a third consecutive Super Bowl, in the fifth in the last 7 seasons.
Yeah, and more than likely we'll win it because the defense, right? I mean, ultimately, Philadelphia may score some points, but I don't think it's going to be 44-40. I think it's going to be some team late in the game, whether it's 30-30 or whether it's 17-17. There's going to be a defense that's going to need to make a stop, get the ball back for our offense, or maintain a lead. So if they end up winning, he's going to have a pretty decent sized role in this thing. So kind of weird. Yeah. I'd like to have some network maybe talk to him and ask him, hey, do you have still aspirations to be a head coach? Are you wondering about that? Are you upset about that? Maybe not. Maybe he's just content with this situation, because we've talked about it many times, right, Ben? I mean, the head coach is completely different from a coordinator. Just the whole role, the whole spectrum of being in charge, and the whole kit and caboodle. It is a different world. So maybe he's content on being the coordinator.
It absolutely is. Scott, there was one vacancy still outstanding in the NFL of the 7 we have seen at some point of this offseason. The New Orleans Saints. Again, we have shared numerous times on this show this week. It is trending toward Kellen Moore becoming the head coach. He has spent 6 years as an offensive coordinator, first 4 in Dallas, last year in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Now, of course, a successful run once again in Philadelphia. He's young. He's under 40, all of those things, and a bright offensive mind. Scott, when you look at the Saints as a franchise, in the scenario that Kellen Moore is going to take over, not exactly a quarterback in place, a lot of questions on the roster outside of that. Some people skeptical that Mickey Loomis is going to remain the general manager for years to come. Do you consider the Saints an attractive destination to become a first-time head coach?
Not really. Not really. All right. And the free agent, they don't have a top draft choice as far as like 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, maybe there's some quarterback out there, Jackson Dart, that they could turn into being, the surprise guy. But on the surface, they're not in a position to draft one of the big time quarterbacks. Quarterbacks that are on the market are basically coach killers. You bring in Sam Darnold, great season with Minnesota, but you don't have the weapons Minnesota has. You bring in Danny Nichols, as I like to call him. You're going to want to give him another shot. He wasn't great with the Giants. Why would he be good with you? But, he seems to be one of the guys. So it's all set up for failure, unless you're just such a great head coach that you could kind of maximize the talent of some of these guys you're going to bring in. But I don't, outside of the vision being, even the division's gotten a little better, but it's not the NFC or AFC North, right? So we'll call it a winnable division. Outside of that, the ownership is in flux. You don't know if you're coming or going. Yeah, it's not exactly the greatest spot, but there's only 32 jobs. Beggars can't be choosers. And I think all these guys are in a position, you want to offer it to me? I'll take it. I'll make it happen.
One of the better perks, I guess you could say, about the Saints right now with roster uncertainty, especially in the most important position, that being the quarterback. Probably not going to be Derek Carr. Spencer Rattler had some glimpses, but certainly not the face of the franchise to build around, is you are in the NFC South, which is a winnable division. Not going to take 12, 13 wins against the best of the best, at least as of right now. Each and every season, you can turn around your franchise's success rate in a playoff berth rather quickly. But if it is Kellen Moore, a lot to figure out, and first and foremost, that quarterback spot. The Saints, of course, will host Super Bowl 59, or at least their home stadium, the Caesars Superdome in NOLA. They are hoping that they can see that kind of success very quickly after it. And again, if this job is not announced, Scott, in the next 48 to 72 hours, even a stronger indication that Kellen Moore is going to be the Saints' next head coach.
Yeah. One question. What separates Kellen Moore from being a guy that's highly regarded and considered versus Brian Schottenheimer? What has Kellen Moore done that Brian Schottenheimer? Neither one could win with Dallas. I don't. What am I missing there? But
yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point. Kellen Moore, young, not necessarily proven, but the promise is there. We'll continue that up next and talk about Super Bowl 59 in the Big Easy here on FFC.
We're not saying every SportsGrid listener is a legend, but you might start thinking about who's going to play you in the movie.
Just saying.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
The White House expects up to 10% of federal employees to quit in a buyout program meant to end work-from-home practices, according to senior administration officials. With the SportsGrid News Flash, I'm Trey Westerberg. A government-wide email President Trump's aides plan to send Tuesday will say employees have until February 6th to decide whether to participate in a deferred resignation program, which would give federal employees the ability to decide now that they will resign in September. The American Federation of Government Employees, the largest federal employee union, is criticizing the program. Bags of Lay's classic potato chips have received an elevated recall status due to an undeclared ingredient that could cause a, quote, life-threatening allergic reaction. The FDA raised the snack food recall to Class 1. The recalled product was distributed to certain retail stores and distributors in Oregon and Washington, and it was available for purchase as early as November 3rd, 2024. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
If you love designer brands and you love clearance, then you're going to love this. Macy's is having a huge designer clearance event right now with incredible new designer markdowns on cold weather styles from BCBG, Hugo Boss, Michael Kors, and more. How big are the markdowns? How about Coach boots for $200 or less? So if you're looking for the things you love all in one place, come in and shop the designer clearance event at Macy's today. Savings off already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
With Progressive's Name Your Price tool, you get coverage options based on how much you want to pay for car insurance. And then you decide how to spend the rest of your money because you're in charge. And right now, you're going to pay for groceries. But you decide what groceries. Just keep in mind you're running out of dishwashing soap. But you decide if you're going to buy that soap. Just those dishes won't clean themselves, will they? Remember, with Progressive's Name Your Price tool, we'll help you find coverage at a fair price. And then you're in charge. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Not available in all states. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Go ahead, Ben. All right, welcome back. Football Full Circle here on the grid. Scott Wetzel along with Ben Stevens, just breaking down some of the NFL coaching moves. Ben and I will touch on the Super Bowl here in a second. But yeah, I did throw it to Ben, before we went to break. because I'm still fascinated with this Brian Schottenheimer thing. I just don't get why there's such angst with this guy. He's 51 years old, lifelong NFL guy, Father Marty. The day he was born into the NFL family, so it's not some obscure guy that no one's ever heard of. Had success with the Dallas Cowboy offense, much like, Kellen Moore has. Never was able to, with Dallas, go to the top and get to the Super Bowl, much like Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore goes to the Chargers after not getting the head coaching job anywhere else as an offensive coordinator. They have success, but do they get to the Super Bowl? No. And yet somehow or another, Kellen Moore is regarded as this great, coordinator, head coach and waiting guy, and Brian Schottenheimer's like, who? The only thing that was goofy with Schottenheimer, I must say, as I was watching that press conference, is, the guy's almost in tears. Jerry Jones was almost in tears. For a press conference, it's supposed to be upbeat and exciting and can't wait for next season to get started. You got two guys that are nearly crying on stage there. It's like, holy fudge, that's a little, but I am fascinated, why Kellen Moore, Kellen Moore, at least Brian Schottenheimer, when you look at him, I see, okay, there's a head coach. There's certain guys, like we were talking about Mike McCarthy, just look goofy. I'm not saying they're not successful or can't be successful or whatever the case may be, but there's certain guys you look at, and you just say, boy, this guy, Todd Bowles comes to mind, right? As far as just that blank stare, as the team is getting beaten down, there's Todd Bowles on the sidelines looking at you like, okay, what's for dinner? So to me, Kellen Moore has that same. It looks like he's 15, and I'm just wondering if some 350-pound defensive lineman's going to listen to Kellen Moore, who looks like he's 15. I mean, I just, that's what I mean by at least Schottenheimer and some of these older coaches. I'm old school. It is what it is. We've had players and turn into coaches that have had success in their 30s. I get that, but if I had my choice, give me the guy in his late 40s, 50s. An experienced guy's been on the sidelines, been through it all, versus a young up and comer. Even though some of those guys have been successful. So, but it looks like it's going to be Kellen Moore with the New Orleans Saints. Is it a good job? Listen, there's only 32. That's the bottom line. And if you start picking and choosing on which jobs, I don't think these guys got to where they were by saying, okay, I can't be successful here. Like the fan can. Ben and I can. We could take an outside view and say, boy, the ownership isn't any good. The quarterback situation's in flux. Not a whole lot on offense. Salary cap hell. Outside of the division being a winnable division. Other than that, there's not too much that's attractive with the New Orleans Saints. Who wants that job? But, if you're a coordinator in the NFL and you're an NFL coach, period, right? I don't think you think that way. I think you say, you know what? I'll get it done. Let's go get Sam Darnold. Let's go get Danny Nichols. Let's go get this guy or that guy. Whoever's there, you're probably so excited about it being your first head coaching job that I don't think you analyze it like the fans do. You just say, I'll take the job, Ben. Just talking about how successful you could be as a head coach with the New Orleans Saints. As long as you have the Saints ownership saying, all right, we understand it might not happen this year. But otherwise, I don't think the head coach in wanting analyze as much as the fans and the media do.
Yeah, and Scott, it is interesting because we were talking about Kellen Moore right before the break, and I was looking up some stats on the offensive ranks in his 4 years in Dallas as the OC. 2019, before Mike McCarthy took over as the head coach, top 10 scoring, top 10 total offense, points and yards per game. 2020, first year with McCarthy, a 6-10 Dallas team. Of course, Dak Prescott dealing with injuries. But in 2021 and 2022, again, back to a top 10 scoring in total offense. And then, for whatever reason, Mike McCarthy was like, hey, I'm going to take over calling plays, Kellen. And then that's when Kellen Moore went to Los Angeles. He does provide some promise. There is no doubt about it at that head coaching position, at least from his offensive background. And they're having great success this year in Philadelphia. The Eagles, after yet another Super Bowl run, might be going back to the drawing board on elevating yet another offensive coordinator. Shane Steichen was the guy there in 2022 when they played the Chiefs in Super Bowl 57. became the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. Same for Jonathan Gannon, who was the DC with the Eagles, and of course now the head coach in Arizona. Did not work out very well in 2023. Got the right guy in place for 2024. Vic Fangio should stick around for 2025. The Eagles might have to go, Scott, and get yet another offensive coordinator if Kellen Moore is in fact hired as the head coach in New Orleans.
Yeah. How about, it's one thing to work with Jalen Hurts, and Dak Prescott, albeit his faults in the postseason, but regular season good. You go down to New Orleans, maybe just if you want to play the game, you've had success with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia, obviously. Maybe you bring in Justin Fields. He would be the one that would be most similar as far as the free agent quarterbacks are concerned. Can you think you could work magic with him? It'll be interesting how much success he actually has down in New Orleans. But it is amazing how these coaches, these teams do have to kind of recycle through and bring in new coordinators seemingly almost every single year. You're damned if you do, right? Damned if you don't. If you don't have any success, then you're not having any success. But then if you have success, then everyone wants your coordinators.
Sure.
So it's tough.
It comes with the success, what should be seen as a positive thing. You have a bright mind on one side of the football that has elevated the organization, has made the best for your team, and now gets his opportunity to become a head coach. Scott, speaking of that, I saw a wild stat and figure for the Detroit Lions. Ben Johnson becoming a head coach, and of course, Aaron Glenn did as well. But Ben Johnson was the first coordinator for the Lions to immediately get a promotion to a head coaching gig, to leave a coordinator job with Detroit and become a head coach somewhere else in one offseason since JFK was president. That goes to show how long the Lions have lacked success. Wild stat. Wow. We'll talk Super Bowl 59 up next in the Super Bowl MVP odds on the other side of the break.
Luck is winning the lottery. Strategy is settling your divorce before cashing in the tickets.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and Sirius XM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Money Line at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning-fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. 800-797-1292. That's 800-797-1292.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Scott Wetzel and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, as we have shared, the countdown to Super Bowl 59 is on. Now, 11 days away. Yes, we will do this each and every day until Super Bowl Sunday on Football Full Circle and all across the SportsGrid radio network. Scott, for the second consecutive year, not only, of course, are the Chiefs playing in a Super Bowl, but they face off against an NFC champion whose running back has a better price than the team's quarterback to win Super Bowl MVP. Last year for Kansas City, entering Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas, it was San Francisco's Christian McCaffrey with a better number to win the MVP award than that of the 49ers quarterback in Brock Purdy. This time around, it's the record-setting and historic season for Saquon Barkley that gives Barkley a shorter price at plus 280 to win Super Bowl 59's MVP hardware in front of Jalen Hurts at plus 370. Patrick Mahomes remains the favorite at plus 110. But I always find this interesting, Scott, because oftentimes if a quarterback in any football award can be in consideration, they often get the benefit of the doubt. The individual success tied closely with team success. But for Philadelphia, the odds makers feeling if the Eagles win a Lombardi trophy, Saquon Barkley has a better chance of becoming that Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, and this is one time with the Super Bowl MVPs that it really is worth betting. Like, there's no sense betting Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, why take the risk for a couple of pennies that Mahomes gets the MVP instead of somebody else? I mean, you might as well just bet Kansas City minus 1.5 or even money line minus 120, right? It's not worth it. But with Philadelphia, it clearly is. That is betting because it could be down to Hurts, or Saquon Barkley. And a lot, don't forget who's decided this. It's the media that's covering the game. So that they bought into the Barkley thing. Whereas not that there's anything wrong with Hurts at all, but I think when push comes to shove, where like you said, Ben, if it's 50-50, they're going to go with the quarterback. I think with Philadelphia, if it's 50-50, they're going to go with Barkley. I do believe that. So, yeah. I don't think he's going to have as much success running the ball against Kansas City as he's had against some of these other teams. But if that's going to be their game plan, I'm thinking game plan, Kansas City is going to try and stop Barkley. Philadelphia's going to have to prove that they can throw the football, which they certainly can. And then maybe to revert baback to Barkley after, Kansas City realizes we can't have 7 men in the box because we're giving up tons of passing yards. So Barkley may end up getting his, 100-plus yards. Another, by the way, over 100-yard total for Barkley. Talk about a bad beat last week, right? 60 yards on the first carry, and he doesn't get to 120. He had 90 by halftime, and he couldn't get to 125. Oh, horrible. But
only 15 carries. That's one of the reasons why for 118 yards. Had the game been slightly more competitive, that certainly would have gotten there. And Scott, his carries attempts prop, his rushing attempts prop for the NFC Championship was 24.5, and the over had the juice. Of course, didn't come close to that either. But he has had at least 118 yards in all 3 playoff games for Philadelphia, 26 carries for 205 yards, 5th most in NFL history in a single playoff game, and 2 touchdowns in that divisional round victory against the LA Rams. Now, the Chiefs defensively so much better than maybe anything Philadelphia has seen so far, but still 112 and a hook is the rushing yards prop for Saquon Barkley. Has the best price to find pay dirt at minus 195 as well. Did not score against the Packers. Now 5 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 games. It is really interesting, Scott, because the favorite is still Patrick Mahomes. And his team, the Chiefs, are still a slight favorite, even if it's by a couple of cents on the money line and only 1.5 to win their 3rd consecutive Super Bowl championship. Should you go deep diving in the odds board to try to find value on Travis Kelce or Xavier Worthy or Chris Jones? History would tell us no. The 3 Lombardi trophies that Mahomes and the Chiefs have already won, Patrick has been named the Super Bowl MVP. So if you believe the Chiefs are the right side, it doesn't hurt to bet the plus 110 for Mahomes to be that MVP winner as well.
Yeah. The only thing is, though, Ben, this would be the year where maybe he doesn't. Like his stats, as we know, this year, they're not great. Is he going to throw for 225, 250 yards? Yeah, probably. But, if you have what would it take for someone else? Right? Would Kareem Hunt have to run for 100 yards or Pacheco have to run for 100 yards? Probably would be on defense. But it's tough to make a case. But if this was going to be the year, this would be it.
Yeah, I think it would have to be a defensive struggle, like a 17-14 game that maybe features a defensive touchdown. Because despite Patrick Mahomes' struggles, is there a pathway for the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl if he is bad? More than likely not. He's Scott Wetzel. I'm Ben Stevens. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Football Full Circle returns at noon Eastern Time.
Now you've done it.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.